Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the legislature is specifically authorized to override a full veto or a line item veto by utilizing the same procedure. The two sections of the Constitution which have been repeatedly referred to, Section 15 and Section 16, are textually linked. Regardless of how the governor characterizes his veto, the only difference between Article 4, Section 15 and 16 is how the governor is to act, not how the legislature acts or responds. In other words, for a full or a partial, as we're attempting here, veto of an appropriations bill, the constitutionally prescribed legislative response and procedure is exactly the same. As a result, the two options available to the governor are two options that are also available to the General Assembly. And his decision or characterization does not constrain the legislatures. When you look at our House rules, House Rule 31 concerning bills vetoed by the governor draws no distinction between the consideration of vetoes or line item vetoes. It simply references the procedure for consideration of a veto pursuant to Article 4, Section 15 of the Constitution, the same procedure that is applicable to both. The House is constitutionally authorized to determine the procedures whereby vetoed bills are considered. Article 2, Section 11, each House shall have its power to determine the rules of its proceedings. Furthermore, Mason's manual also recognizes this authority. A constitutional provision relating to legislative consideration of a vetoed bill is construed in connection with the constitutional provision authorizing each House to determine its own rules of procedure. Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure, 754, subsection 7. So despite claims to the contrary that this is somehow an unconstitutional process, that is simply not true. The Jubileer decision clearly said that we are to include the following: the source of funds, the destination of funds, and any attendant language necessary to effectuate the item. Article 4, Section 16 of the Constitution provides both the General Assembly and the governor with control over the particulars of a general appropriations bill. It is a clear expression of intent to give the governor, to the extent of refusing approval, the same control over particulars of a general appropriations bill as a General Assembly can also exercise. That is from the Commonwealth versus Barnett case in 1901. The General Assembly is the primary source of legislative authority in the Commonwealth, as verified by our Constitution, and therefore is able to override a line and include the necessary attendant language regardless of the form of a governor's veto and how he characterizes it. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also instructive to read Article 4, Section 16. It has not been construed literally for over 100 years. I referenced this in my first set of comments. In 1901, in the same Barnett case, they clearly said that the governor could unilaterally reduce the amount of any item. When you recognize this and look at the case, in the dissent, Justice Mastrazat noted the limited existential danger to legislative authority which would result from reading into Section 16 of the governor's power to reduce an appropriation. It is simply a rebalancing of the legislative authoritative scales between our chamber, the Senate, and the governor. We absolutely have this authority, and we should continue to do so, and I encourage our members to exercise that legislative authority so that we can appropriate the money to those individuals who so desperately need it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.